It's time to cook with Susan Beck, and tonight we are going to make some caramel corn, and we're going to sit around the fire and enjoy this tasty snack while that snow just falls and falls. You know, it's a Wisconsin winter and we just can't quite get rid of that snow. Well, caramel corn is really a pretty easy thing to make. You just need some brown sugar, some corn syrup, some salt, some margarine or butter. I'm going to just use margarine tonight. And after it cooks, we're going to do a little magic work with some baking soda. It'll make it fizz and foam. And the key ingredient is the popcorn. Well, I already have the popcorn popped. This is 2 big poppers full. In my air popper here, I have probably about 8 quarts. And until you know how much your popcorn popper makes, maybe put this into one of your measuring cups and measure it out by the quart. Once your popcorn is popped, I suggest turning on your stove. Mine is preheating to 200 degrees. I'm going to cook this at a low temperature. Into my big pan, and I do suggest a big pan because when we do add that magic baking soda, it's going to make it fizz and foam, and we do not want it to be flowing over. So better to have a pan that's too big than one that's too small. We're going to do the brown sugar. By pressing on it, we want to always, when you measure brown sugar, it should be packed. So I get 2 cups of brown sugar as well as 2 cups of corn syrup. I am using the light corn syrup. I prefer that over the dark corn syrup. I have even made this before though with some of our maple syrup that we have boiled down from our own tree. And we also have 2 sticks of margarine and 1 teaspoon of salt. So our next step is to take this over to the stovetop, and we are going to let all the sugar crystals melt and everything blend together. We want to get it to a little simmer, and we're going to let it cook for about 5 minutes because we really don't want this to be grainy. All the ingredients are in this big pot on medium heat. I don't usually heat this on high. Sugars can burn quite easily. The other key is to stir frequently once it starts to melt a bit here. And I'm going to use a wooden spoon for my stirring. Well, I'm just stirring every so often, making sure my sugars don't burn, getting my wooden spoon right down into the groove of the pan and running across the bottom. As long as I keep my heat low and stir often, I won't have an issue. But keep in mind that even though all of my ingredients are pretty well melted together here, I really do need this to simmer for about 5 minutes. Well, my timer is counting down because I've got quite the big bubbles going here, so it is time to stir. I got a little steam action. And I turned my burner down to medium low because it's going quite well here. I don't want this to boil over. 5 minutes have gone by. We're going to add that baking soda. And it goes, and it's going to make it kind of foam, and it becomes bubblier. If you can see those foam streaks through there. All right, and this makes the caramel sauce just a little less dense and a little less heavy. That carbon dioxide in that baking soda is reacting, and we get this light foamy mixture. And you might be able to see now why I wanted my biggest pan, because if I'd used my next smallest saucepan, it probably would have bubbled over on me. One little tip I have is that I like to pour my caramel sauce over my caramel in something besides what I'm going to be baking it in. Otherwise, I feel like I end up with a lot of the caramel kind of down on the bottom of the pan and, you know, basically going to waste. You know, the caramel is the best part. So I'm going to put about half of it over each of my bowls here. And then we'll stir it up and hopefully get all of it coated really, really well. All right, so we've got about half of it on each of those there. And we'll just stir. And notice I tried not to overfill these bowls either because it makes it easier for the stirring. Now, if you say, oh, that's a lot of caramel corn, well, this is a fabulous gift. In fact, during COVID, my kids and I stuck these in people's mailboxes and on their doorsteps. This is back when you weren't supposed to, you know, venture out of your house and socialize with anybody. And so we made some great May Day gifts out of this. It stores well. I'll be storing mine in these plastic containers. I'll talk about that more later, but a Ziploc bag would work too. And the other thing is you could easily make half. Remember, I ran my popcorn popper twice and had about 8 quarts. And I used an entire bottle, 2 cups of corn syrup, 2 cups of flour. These are easy measurements to reduce the size of, so you could easily turn this into half of a batch. You could also make it into an even bigger batch. The problem there is you probably can't get it all to fit in your oven. Now this is quick and easy to whip up. It does take a little while to bake though. This will bake in the oven for an hour. We will stir it every 15 minutes. So I actually love using my big turkey roaster for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in, and I'm gonna show you what I have in the bottom of my bowl. So as you can see, I have a lot of caramel down there, and if that was in the bottom of the dish I was baking, it would just stay there. But because it's at this other bowl, I can just kind of scrape that out of there. The other thing that I like to watch for when I get down to this part of the bowl is getting rid of any of those, what they call old maids. All right, this other bowl, some of it will fit in here, and the rest of it, I'm just gonna put it right back in the bowl that I did my stovetop cooking on. Now, only do that if your saucepan that you use, your soup pot or whatever you're using, is actually oven proof. Mine is, so that can go right back in. Otherwise, you could use a big like baking dish or 9x13 pans or something like that. But make sure whatever you're using is oven proof. All right. As you're selecting your dishes for baking your caramel corn, be sure you can configure your oven racks in a way that they all fit in at once so that you can finish this project in 1 hour. The first round of baking is done, and you know what? I just keep those sticky bowls that I have that I started off with my popcorn in because I just find it's easier to kind of stir this up if I pour it into there. And it also allows me, because even though we poured over the green bowls with our caramel, we still end up with a lot of caramel that just drizzles all the way to the bottom. And this way I can scrape that off and really get it on top of those kernels of popcorn and stir. And I'm gonna do this 3 more times before I'm done for a total of hour of cooking time and 3 different stirs. So baking it, purpose of that is to get that caramel to actually like attach and adhere to the corn and makes it a little less sticky. And then this is going to go back into my baking dishes and back into the oven for 15 more minutes. The caramel corn is in for its last 15 minutes. I gave it its final stir. So I can go ahead and clean up these sticky bowls. But you know what? Anytime you're cooking with something sugary like this, just get your water super hot and some hot water and soap melts this caramel right off. The final step is to cool the caramel corn. I love to use just torn up brown paper bags. I just use the inside of them and just spread your caramel corn out so it can cool off. It's looking great. I kind of like to just break it up a little bit. As I mentioned, I like storing my caramel corn in these plastic containers. These are just some cheap Rubbermaid containers that you can just pop the lid on and it keeps it nice and fresh. A Ziploc bag would work just as well, so I'll fill another one of these with the rest of my caramel corn here, but we gotta give it a taste. So nice and crunchy, and that caramel's now baked right onto every kernel. It's just absolute deliciousness. You know, it reminds me so much. I can't make this and not think about Halloween growing up as a kid. My favorite place to go to in my little small town was the Sims household because Mrs. Sims would always have bags of homemade caramel corn. That was the best Halloween treat.